want to say that I love reading these because the whole idea, and I know it sounds very simple, but the whole idea why an author or why us as writers, why we want to put our characters into a situation in which they're going to write a letter is simply to ensure that it creates meaning. All of you have whatever it is, whatever that letter was, you've mentioned an emotion attached to it. It meant something. And Mandy actually said exactly that. It meant the world to her parents. And so we have characters who need to make meaning of whatever it is we're putting them through. And so the whole idea or the purpose of the letter is to give them an outlet to do that. But how do we do that exactly? Or how does that take place? Because I know it sounds like a very abstract concept. All right, so we have to frame our character. And it's sort of like allowing our character, actually, but it's not allowing, it's forcing our characters to be in a communicative situation. And so it's like, they're going to become, as writers, they'll become the sender, and they want to reach out to a receiver. And in turn, like they have a message through a channel, which in this case will be the letter, about their narrated world. All right. Now, knowing that our characters are going to sort of like now live in this communication bubble for the sake of the letter, there are three things that we need to take into consideration when we're writing these letters. The first thing is that characters write because they cannot speak. And again, I know that it sounds sort of like even common sense, but the whole idea behind epistolary communication, is literally justified by the separation between the writer and the receiver. Now, the idea is that if one is going to write because they cannot speak, well, why can't they speak? There are several reasons. This absence may take several forms. It can happen because there is a geographical separation, or it might be caused by psychological or emotional distance, or a chronological gap. And it's important that we take this into consideration. This absence that they're experiencing, how does that impact them? And how will that in turn impact the content of their letter as well? Which carries us into our second point, or our second layer of intentionality. So once we've figured out that there is this absence that does not allow them to speak, so then in turn they'll write, well, what's on their mind? What is so urgent that needs to be written? And when we figure this out, it's sort of like thinking of it in terms of the content of a character's letter will function as a connector between two distant points. So again, we have a sender and a receiver, and this letter is going to be a bridge between the sender and the receiver. Now, because we are these authors who love to put our characters in different situations, we get to focus either on the bridge or on the distance.
That's fascinating, Nicole. That's such a golden nugget. That's so interesting. Authors will choose to focus either on the bridge or the distance. Now, is that because?
Well,
I want to know more. Are we going to dig into this?
Yeah. Okay. So the next bit is, all right. So if you have if you've realized why your character is choosing to write, and you've sort of figured out what the content of their letter will be, then it's sort of like, okay, so do you want this letter to be a source of bringing them together, or do you want to separate them even further? And when we think about it, it's sort of like, well, how will the letter in itself be a source of tension? Or even like, how will it create conflict? Because it's sort of like that whole idea that every line should either advance the plot or reveal character. Well, in our letters, like when we're choosing to write letters intentionally, it needs to be in some way, shape, or form a source of tension. And I feel like the message that a character will write is fertile ground to explore everything that goes on in their mind. Like, for example, the power struggle that happens when they have a want that is not met, or they're believing a lie that is just not true, or they're haunted by this ghost. And it's sort of like we can think of the content of the letter in relation to where they are on their journey. Which then brings us to the third layer of intentionality. And this is, I think it's my favorite one. It's the characters' letters will emphasize in-betweenness. And I love this because as storytellers, we love that. We love to know that there is a beginning and there is an ending, but then there's like the murky middle and everything happens there. And it's sometimes like even the hardest part to write because we have to put our characters through different situations and watch them hopefully grow or transition. And the letter itself, like the actual letter, symbolizes that in-betweenness. The moment that letter was written, it no longer belongs to the receiver, sorry, to the writer. It stops being that, even if it's a diary, if it's on paper, like the whole premise that it could be read by someone who should not be reading it allows for this letter or this diary to just sit in between. And because there are different entities making meaning of it, it sits like it lies right in the middle of all of them. The next thing is that characters will hint at their inner journey. And I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So when we think about, again, their absence and how that is reflected in their message, and whether or not we're choosing to focus on the bridge or the distance, we get to think about, okay, so how will a character hint at where they are on their inner journey? Like, or have they learned a lesson? Or are they just on the start, ready to just be exposed to a lot of situations? And then finally, the purpose of the letter is to lie within two opposite and conflicting poles and encourage the inner journey. And there are different, while I was reading, there are these like epistolary liminalities or dichotomies or polarities that basically, and I'll share them now, allow us to think about or like to frame how we want to include or embed the letter in our story. And it's sort of like, and to be honest, it doesn't necessarily happen like, okay, we're gonna write the letter and then we'll see how it fits in the story. It'll happen sometimes organically, where it might be like the process might be thought out, but the idea is that the letter is going to lie between these two different polarities. For example, the first one is bridge or barrier. In what situation is this letter going to allow our characters to be wanting to come closer, or on the contrary, like just go different ways? Or for example, portrait and mask, in which, like, to what capacity is, or are our characters being like their true selves, or are they being deceitful? And then there is, I'm here now, you are there then, which things where it's sort of like, okay, so there are people in different places in different times. And what happens when they're going to communicate? There is also number 4 is participation, isolation. Again, how can this letter be a source of wanting to like bring people together, or on the contrary, like people needing to or wanting to not participate and remain in isolation? And then number 5 is like trust and distrust, which it sort of makes me think about like the whole trope of enemy to lovers, because it's like the idea of they need to like there's trust that needs to be gained. Or for example, when there is okay, I'm trying to think of an example and I had a really good one, but I can't remember it now. Like when there is a mentor and then there is someone new that comes in and they sort of have to like take them under their wing, but they don't really trust them. And so they have to gain their trust. And the last one is reliability and unreliability. And again, how will these different polarities allow for the letter to sit right in between them and then just watch what happens?
Nicole, could you explain the third one a little bit more? The IU here, there, now, then.
All right, this is the one you used in your letter.
That's funny. Great,
Right.
awesome.
So
Oh, now I get it. It's the past,
Yeah.
past IU. Okay.
yeah, it's sort of like, how does a person from the past want to reach out to a person into the future, for example, or vice versa? Or how does, let's say, a character runs into like the long lost letters of her dead grandma. So like they're not in the same time, and they're not in the same place, and they're not the same people. And even if it's the same, and this is gonna sound like just really abstract, but it's Lily's example. Even if they're the same self, they're not the same.
Yeah, that's for sure. Their life circumstances have made them
Yeah.
different. Mm-hmm.
They're changed.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Cool. Thank
So-
you so much.
All right, so far, I've mentioned that the ultimate goal is to create meaning. And because I know it sounds very abstract, I went into like, all right, a character writes because they cannot speak. And our job is to figure out, why can't they speak? What is the source of their absence? And how does that absence impact them? Then the content of a character's letters will function as a connector between two distant points. And it is our job to decide if we want to focus on this connection as a bridge or as a separation. And finally, a character's letters will emphasize the idea of in-betweenness. And it's the beauty of like the whole idea of this character being in between, and the letter is in between. And there's this message that even the external reader is sort of like eavesdropping. And so he's in between as well. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. And this is like